do chapter 2 today. In the first part of our textbook, we're going to talk about social thinking. That is to say, how we think in relation to other people, or how other people affect our thinking, or something like this. Um, we will move into behavior later. That is to say, how our behavior changes in the presence of others. So for now, it's just like how our thoughts change because other people are around. Right? So in this first chapter, we're going to focus on this first chapter of the second, whatever. We're going to talk about like who am I, and how you think about yourself. Before you can talk about how you're influenced by the presence of others, you really need to figure out what you think about yourself. Okay. So there is an interplay between the the spotlight effect. All right, whatever. All right, there's an interplay between sense of self and the social world. I guess that makes sense. But the spotlight effect. We believe that people are watching us more than they are. It's like I'm busy. I have my own things going on. I'm not really watching you. Really neat experiment. They had kids wear a Barry Manilow T-shirt, and you guys remember Barry Manilow? Mandy, come on. Copacabana, yeah, whatever. So they wore a Barry Manilow T-shirt, and then afterwards, they said these kids were just, oh my God, they were so embarrassed. They thought everybody was staring at them. So they asked the class, how many people actually saw the kid wearing the Barry Manilow? Like 20% said, yeah, I saw the guy. I mean, nobody was looking. All right, nobody pays attention to that stuff. Likewise, we're so clueless. We truly believe other people, like if we're nervous, other people are going to see it and they're just going to read it from us. Just read our nervousness. So again, another study, they had these people give a speech in front of a class, and then they rated them. Oh, what did they rate them? Yeah, and one can just give the speech, and then they said, how good do you think it was? They had the class judge how good they thought it was. They had the person giving the speech say how relaxed they felt, and the people in the audience how relaxed they looked, basically. And so then what they did was they put them in a control condition, and then in a second group they took some different people and they said, it's okay. It's okay if you're nervous. It's okay. Didn't help very much. But in a third condition, what they did was they taught them, okay, you know what? Other people aren't really watching you in the way you think they are. They can't see it. If you're nervous, they can't tell. And so people in this condition where they were literally told about this then felt that they had given a better speech, and they felt I was more relaxed, and in fact the audience agreed. The audience agreed it was a better speech. The audience agreed this guy looked like they were relaxed. So clearly people aren't watching you. They just don't know. Okay? The self-concept. This is an interesting idea. The question, who am I? And it's a very important question. One of the most famous tests of personality in psychology is simply I guess it was 20 is what they ask you to write down. So you respond, I am, and then, whatever you want to add there. And what you write in response to I am is a very interesting indicator of what you believe about yourself or your self-concept. It's usually used in relation to studying differences between collectivistic and individualistic cultures. That is, and we'll get to that in one of these couple slides. But people in individualistic cultures, that is like us in America, we're more likely to say, I am tall, I am strong, I am smart, or something. Whereas people from collectivistic cultures are more likely to say something like, I am a member of my family, I am a brother, I am a student, to symbolize their roles rather than individual characters and qualities about themselves. Self-schema. A self-schema is interesting. A schema actually is something that comes out of cognitive psychology. A schema is sort of like a mental representation of what you think something should look like. Let's say you might have a schema of a restaurant. And if you're like me and you were a tragically poor college student for many, many years, the schema of a restaurant you have involves something like McDonald's. And so somebody says, okay, close your eyes and imagine a restaurant. And so I close my eyes and I'm like, McDonald's, because that, whatever, okay? Feel bad for the poor perpetual student here. But what we find is that this schema then will influence, this mental representation I have will influence how I interpret other situations. They'll show me a picture of a restaurant, say, remember everything you can in the next minute or whatever, and lo and behold, later on they're like, was there ketchup on the table? And I'll be like, I'll close my eyes, I don't know, I can't remember if there was ketchup, but my mental representation of a restaurant is one that might or might not have ketchup, and that mental representation is going to influence my memory more than perhaps in the actual situation. Well, how does this reflect in social psychology? You can have a schema about yourself. That is to say, I feel good about myself. I don't know. I feel positive, or I feel I have a low sense of low self-esteem or something. And so now you get to a somewhat ambiguous situation. Okay, the person in front of you doesn't hold the door open for you, and if you have perhaps a low self-esteem, you might see that and go, oh man, he doesn't even like me enough to hold the door for me. But if you have a high enough self-esteem, you might see the exact same situation and go, you know what, he probably didn't even notice me. Okay, and so ambiguous social situations can be interpreted based on the way that you feel about yourself. Well, the self-reference effect. Yeah, we tend to remember things better if we phrase it in terms of ourselves. Aren't we surprised how selfish we are? Possible selves, images of what we perhaps could become, either good or bad. I had a student in the past that would carry on her binder, she carried a picture on the front cover of her binder, pretty glaringly obvious, of a huge with a body like woohoo, and she used that to inspire her, to motivate her, to constantly remind her about what her possible future self could look like. And I don't know, I don't even want to go there. Okay, we define our social self in a lot of ways. Yeah, the roles we play. I'm a father in some situations, a professor in some situations. In many ways, I have to become a different person. Well, now we're going to talk about that. I'm going to carry certain characteristics with me from one situation to the next, but yet as I move from one role to another, I in many ways become different people. Though I carry something, some commonalities across all roles, yet there are many aspects of myself that change. All right, what else we got? Okay. What is the self? Put it all together. Okay, whatever. Here's a good one. The individualism, collectivism, as I already talked about it. Individualism is the concept of giving, the most important thing is me. Here in America, there was the best-selling book in the 1970s. I know, 1970s, but it was called "Looking Out for Number One," and this was a really, really American concept. That we could consider number one ourselves. In a collectivistic culture, number one has to be your family or your group or your tribe or whatever that might be. And so we find that we in America, we have, or in fact here, very, very simple thing. I do a lot of writing, and my wife translates. I do Korean writing. I do writing for Korean newspapers and things like this. And I write about like my research or something in self-control. And I find that when my wife goes to translate the word self, they don't really have a direct translation of the word because the word just doesn't translate directly. They don't think this word self in the same way we do. The very fact that we have chapter 2 called the self is unheard of. You couldn't have chapter 2 the self in a textbook in a collectivistic culture. Generally speaking, here in America, we're generally more individualistic than collectivistic, though there are individual differences. Some of us are more individualistic than others. Some of us are more collectivistic than others. Likewise, in Asia, they tend to be, as a group, more collectivistic. But again, even within that group, some are more and some are less. But these different types of cultures where we give priority to different things, it becomes a major theme, in fact, in cultural psychology or cross-cultural psych, if you've ever taken or will take. What does it say? People are born in a collectivistic culture. People are born into an extended family. That's right. Your loyalty goes to them. Um, we find that things like American patriotism doesn't translate well to other countries, like in the Middle East, where they have tribe level loyalties. They don't particularly recognize the national flag in the same way that we might. And because of their collectivistic upbringing, they have different loyalties. And I'm just, without getting into a lot of details, suffice it to say, many of the American dreams and goals for the Middle East are destined for failure because they just don't think like we do. They don't put their loyalty in the same ways we do. Okay, you can read all that. All right, very interesting. Before I run out of my 15 minutes here, um, in an individualistic society, we find, or the independent view of the self, generally speaking, in this independent view of the self on the left side, you notice that I am who I am, and you notice that my mother and my father and my friend, I mean, they're all lovely and they're all, but they're out. They're not part of me. They are, something separate. Whereas an interdependent view of the self, which is more common in the collectivistic cultures, we find that the very definition of who I am incorporates those people that are important to me, those members of my in group, okay, my mother, my father, that I am these people, okay. We find that in the independent sense of the self, we're more likely to find that when a person, if a person has an independent view of the self, when they go from one situation to the next, they will tend to be the same. There will be many characteristics that they share from one, let's say, role to another, father, professor, etc. But if you have an interdependent view of the self, you're much more likely to basically shift who you are. You become a completely different person in different roles because there are different roles to play. Anyway, we find that let's say, for example, those pens up there. They take people from an individualistic society and they say, here's a free pen, have a free pen. And people in the individualistic societies choose that oddball red one. You take people in a collectivistic society and you say, choose a pen, and they choose one of the green ones, okay, one that's in common. Or the picture of the fish here. People in independent societies are much more likely to talk about, describe the picture. They talk about the lead fish. Is it a lead fish? But the people in the interdependent collectivistic societies are more likely to talk about the relationships. Well, the frog is behind the plant. Okay, you don't find as many of these relationship words. I have to pause. I'm totally out of time. Part 2 in a minute.